Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind the 21st century and going somewhere hotter, dustier, and much more pyramid-shaped. So before you settle in, take a moment to dim the lights, maybe play a little ambient Nile River sound in the background and get comfortable. Because we're about to time travel thousands of years into the past, back to ancient Egypt. And no, you're not waking up as a pharaoh or a god or even a noble sipping wine while being fanned with ostrich feathers. Sorry. That life requires better connections and a lot more gold. Instead, you've drawn the more realistic lot in history's lottery. You are a servant, a very small, very replaceable cog in the great machine of the Egyptian court. But don't worry, that doesn't mean your story isn't fascinating. Quite the opposite. Tonight, you'll experience what it's like to live as a pharaoh's servant. From waking in a mud brick hut by the Nile, to bustling in the palace's endless halls, to watching rituals that ordinary Egyptians could only dream of witnessing. So take a breath, relax, and let's step into your new life. You were born in a village not far from the Nile, a place where houses are made of mud and straw, goats roam through narrow alleys, and the sun wakes up earlier than anyone has the energy for. Your family is poor, like almost everyone else you know. Your father tends the fields, bent double in the hot sun, muttering about the gods who clearly favor someone else's crops. Your mother spends her days grinding grain into bread, complaining that even the gods would get bored eating the same thing every single day. You are the second child, which is already a problem. Firstborn sons inherit things, even if it's just a hoe and some questionable goats. You, on the other hand, are basically insurance, an extra pair of hands for work, a backup in case your brother gets stepped on by a cow, and a mouth to feed when the harvest doesn't quite deliver. As a child, your world is simple. You play by the riverbank, splashing with other kids, catching frogs, and occasionally annoying crocodiles, which is never recommended. You chase chickens, steal dates from baskets, and watch fishermen pull up nets that smell like every bad decision you'll ever make in your life. Nights are spent under the stars, the desert sky clearer than you've ever seen, while your parents tell stories about gods with animal heads who control everything from floods to headaches. But even in your little village, rumors travel. Rumors of the Pharaoh, the living god, the man whose palace shines like the sun itself. You can't imagine such wealth, such power, such extravagance. After all, in your home, the most valuable thing you own is a clay jar that doesn't leak too much. Then one year, the harvest is poor. The Nile's flood was stingy. The grain is thin. And your father spends long hours staring into empty baskets like he can will them full. It's in that year of thin bread and thinner patience that a man arrives. He wears linen finer than anything you've ever touched. He carries a staff that looks like it could double as a weapon, and he speaks with the authority of someone who hasn't sweated in years. He's here on the Pharaoh's business, he says. Taxes, tribute, service. He looks around the village like a man shopping at a market, and his eyes land on you. You don't understand what's happening at first. Your mother fusses, your father looks grim, and suddenly you're being scrubbed like you haven't been in months. The man asks questions, nods, and before you know it, you've been chosen. Not sold, heaven forbid, that would sound shameful. Chosen for service, for opportunity, for something greater than carrying water jars until your back folds in half like your father's. Your parents say this is an honor. You're not so sure, but at least it means you won't starve this year. And so, with little more than a small bundle of bread and a carved amulet from your mother, you leave your village. You don't know it yet, but your childhood is over. Ahead lies a palace larger than any building you can imagine, rules you don't yet understand, and a life of service to a man who is considered half a god. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. The journey to the palace is long. Days of walking along dusty roads, the Nile shimmering in the distance like it's mocking your thirst. You travel with other chosen ones, boys and girls from villages just like yours, all scrubbed half clean and trying not to look terrified. The older ones whisper rumors that servants who displease the Pharaoh are fed to crocodiles or buried alive in the foundations of temples. Comforting. Eventually you arrive, and the first thing you realize is this: everything you thought was big is small. Your village? Tiny. Your father's hut? Laughably insignificant. Even the fields you once thought endless could fit inside the courtyard of this palace. The walls are colossal, smooth limestone painted with gods striding taller than any man. Columns tower above you like stone forests capped with lotus flowers. Gold gleams in the sun. Incense wafts from braziers, thick and sweet, masking the smell of sweat and livestock. Everywhere you look, there are people: priests, guards, scribes, and of course, servants. Too many servants to count, each moving with a practiced rhythm like ants in a hive. You, however, do not move with practiced rhythm. You gawp, you stare. Your mouth hangs open like a tourist who wandered into the wrong century. A guard smacks the back of your head and reminds you to bow. You learn quickly. The first days are not glamorous. You are bathed again, shaved, and given a linen kilt that itches like a particularly judgmental goat. You're taught how to walk properly, back straight, eyes down, hands folded, because apparently your normal way of existing is offensive to the gods. You're also taught silence. Servants are not to speak unless spoken to, and even then the correct response is usually some variation of "Yes, master," "At once, master," or "Of course, your eternal magnificence, master." Training comes fast. One old servant, a man with the expression of someone who's been disappointed since birth, lectures you on palace etiquette. Do not enter a room before your superior. Do not step on the Pharaoh's shadow. It is considered sacred. Do not, under any circumstances, look directly at the Pharaoh unless instructed, because apparently eye contact with a god king is too much for your unworthy soul to handle. Meals are simple: bread, onions, beer. Not the frothy tavern kind, but thick, sour, liquid bread in a pot. You choke it down while watching the higher servants dine on dates, figs, and roasted goose. You wonder how many lifetimes it will take before you reach goose status. Probably several. Your first assignment is sweeping a courtyard. Simple, right? Except the courtyard is roughly the size of your entire village, and the broom is more decorative than effective, scattering dust instead of collecting it. You sweep for hours under the blazing sun until your skin feels like roasted fish. When you're finally allowed to stop, another servant tells you you've done it all wrong and must start again tomorrow. Welcome to palace life. Nights are spent in cramped quarters with other lowly servants. The air is hot and heavy, filled with the snores and groans of dozens of tired bodies. You sleep on a reed mat, dreaming of bread you can't afford and rivers you'll never swim in again. But every now and then, you catch glimpses of the world you've been dragged into. Once, while carrying water, you pass through a hall where priests are chanting before a colossal statue of Horus, the falcon-headed god. The statue gleams with gold in the torchlight, and for a moment you forget how tired you are. Another time, you see the Pharaoh himself, or rather, you see a flash of him, a tall figure in a headdress surrounded by guards, priests, and fan-bearers. He doesn't look at you. Why would he? You are dust. But even that glimpse is enough to leave your knees weak. To see the living God is to be reminded just how small you really are. Over time, routine settles in. You rise before dawn, wash in cold water, eat bread that could double as a weapon, and begin your chores. Sweeping, carrying water, grinding grain, fetching tools, always moving, always invisible, always afraid of doing something wrong. Because mistakes in the palace aren't just embarrassing, they're fatal. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there's a strange pride too. You are here in the heart of Egypt, serving the Pharaoh himself. Your family back in the village will speak of you with awe, maybe even envy. You may not wear gold, but you live closer to it than they ever will. And as the moon rises over the Nile, casting silver light on the palace walls, you lie on your mat and think, perhaps this life, hard as it is, will make you more than just another forgotten villager. Perhaps serving a god leaves a trace, even on dust. The day begins before dawn. Not because you're an early riser by choice, but because the palace doesn't care about your sleep schedule. A horn sounds in the courtyard, servants shuffle awake like reluctant ghosts, and you roll off your reed mat onto the cool stone floor. Your body aches. You've barely recovered from yesterday's work, but that's not your concern. The Pharaoh will awaken soon, and a palace must already hum like a well-oiled chariot before he even opens his eyes. You splash cold water on your face, rub your teeth with a stick that tastes like bitter mint, and tie on your linen kilt. You're not allowed jewelry, those are for people who matter, but you do have a little amulet your mother gave you. You keep it hidden under your belt. It's the only thing here that feels like it belongs to you. Your first duty, water. Always water. Egypt runs on the Nile, and so does the palace. Buckets are hauled, jars are filled, basins are topped up. You and the other low-ranking servants carry clay jugs that feel heavier with each step, while higher servants supervise with the enthusiasm of statues. By the time the sun peaks over the horizon, your arms feel like they've been replaced with papyrus reeds. Then comes sweeping, always sweeping. Sand sneaks into every corner of the palace, as if the desert is trying to reclaim what men built. You sweep courtyards so wide you can barely see the other side. Brush colonnades lined with lotus-shaped columns, and dust shrines where even the statues seem to judge your technique. The rule is simple. If you can see dust, you failed. And in Egypt, dust is everywhere. By mid-morning, the palace is alive. Priests chant in incense-filled halls, guards march with spears gleaming, scribes hurry with papyrus scrolls tucked under their arms. You blend into the background, silent and invisible, carrying trays of bread, jars of beer, baskets of fruit. Nobles sweep past in linen so fine it looks like mist. You bow so often your spine feels permanently bent. Around noon, the heat becomes unbearable. The sun blazes down, cooking the courtyard stones until you could fry bread on them. Fan-bearers follow the Pharaoh and his family, waving enormous ostrich feather fans to keep them cool. You, meanwhile, sweat like a camel in a wool cloak. You dream of shade, of the Nile, of diving into its cool water and never coming back out. Instead, you carry another jar of beer to another noble who doesn't know your name. Meals for the servants are quick and simple. Bread, onions, lentils, and beer. Always beer. Not the party kind, but thick, sour, filling enough to keep you moving. You eat squatting in the shade with other servants, trading whispers of gossip. Which noble insulted which priest? Who got caught stealing figs? Whether the Pharaoh will announce a festival soon?
Festivals mean extra work, yes, but also extra food. Maybe even meat, if the gods are generous. After the meal, it's back to chores. Today you're assigned to help in the temple precinct. That means carrying offerings, loaves of bread, jars of milk, honey, beer, even live geese, up to the altars. Priests in leopard skin robes chant hymns as they place the food before the statues of the gods. You stand back, sweating, trying not to sneeze as incense smoke curls into your nose. Later, you help bar the sacred statue, scrubbing gold that gleams brighter than the sun. The priests whisper that the god himself inhabits the statue during rituals. You're careful not to drop the sponge. No one wants to be remembered as the idiot who angered a god by leaving streaks on his face. By evening, the palace shifts into a quieter rhythm. Torches are lit, shadows stretch long across painted walls, and the pharaoh dines in private with his closest family. Servants like you are summoned to bring trays of roasted goose, figs, and wine sweet as honey. You're not allowed to taste any of it, but the smell alone makes your stomach ache with longing. When the pharaoh eats, silence rules. You place the trays carefully, bow, and step back. You do not look directly at him. You do not speak. You are the background, a living shadow that exists only to move objects from one table to another. After the meal, the pharaoh retires. Guards take their posts. The nobles vanish into their chambers. And the servants, those who aren't working the night shift, finally collapse into their quarters. You lie down on your reed mat, sore and weary. The room is filled with snores, coughs, and the occasional muttered prayer. Outside, the Nile flows under the moonlight, steady and eternal. And as you drift towards sleep, you think, this is your life now. Hard, thankless, invisible, but also extraordinary in its own quiet way. Because you live and breathe in the heart of Egypt. You walk through halls painted with gods, serve a man who is treated as divine, and witness rituals that most people can only imagine. You are a servant, yes, but you are a servant to history itself.
The next morning feels like every other, heavy, sweaty, and full of chores. But word spreads quickly. Today there will be a festival. Festivals in Egypt are not just parties, they're cosmic events, rituals meant to keep the gods satisfied and the Nile obedient. For the villagers who travel in from the countryside, it's a rare glimpse of splendor. For you, as a palace servant, it means extra running, extra lifting, and extra opportunities to drop something expensive and ruin your career. Still, you feel the excitement. The palace is buzzing like a hive of bees. Servants scrub courtyards until the stones gleam white in the sun. Priests rehearse chants in deep, droning voices that vibrate in your chest. Guards polish bronze until it blinds you. Even the cats look busier than usual, slinking between columns as if they too have a role to play. Your duty today is carrying offerings. You load baskets of bread, figs, and dates, along with jars of beer and wine, and follow the long line of servants into the temple precinct. Incense smoke thickens the air until it feels like you're breathing through honey. Drums beat in slow, steady rhythms, guiding your steps. And then you see him, the Pharaoh. Not a flash, not a glimpse, but a full procession. He strides beneath a canopy of gold, his headdress glittering, his false beard shining in the sun. Fan-bearers wave enormous ostrich feathers on either side of him. Priests chant his titles, Lord of the Two Lands, Son of Ra, Beloved of the Gods, until your ears ring with them. You bow so low your forehead nearly smacks the stone. You don't dare look directly at him, but out of the corner of your eye you catch enough. His robes, shimmering white, the crook and flail crossed on his chest,
the way even the ground seems to tremble beneath his steps. For a moment, you forget your sore arms, your empty stomach, your life of endless chores. For a moment, you believe the stories, that this man is not just a king, but a god walking the earth. The procession moves toward the temple. You shuffle along behind, carrying your offerings. Inside, the chanting grows louder, the air thicker with incense. Priests pour libations of milk and wine before the gods. Bread is stacked high, honey drips golden in the torchlight, and geese honk nervously before their throats are slit in sacrifice. You stand at the edge, invisible as always, but you watch. You see the Pharaoh bow before the gods, and you realize even a god-king must serve someone. The gods are always higher. When the ritual ends, the offerings are distributed. Priests take their share, nobles claim the choicest cuts of meat, and servants like you wait for the scraps. You manage to snatch a fig, sweet and rich, the best thing you've eaten in months. You savor it slowly, knowing this small luxury will carry you through another week of onions and bread. The festival continues outside. Musicians play harps and flutes, dancers whirl in linen skirts, acrobats tumble across the courtyard. The people cheer, laugh, clap. For them, this is joy, a break from fields and famine. For you, it's more work. Hauling water for guests, sweeping up after parades, making sure no one important trips on a loose stone. Still, there are moments of wonder. At dusk, torches are lit, their flames flickering gold against the painted walls. The air hums with music, the scent of roasted meat, the murmurs of 1,000 voices. You glance up at the sky and see the first stars appear, faint against the deepening blue. And for a heartbeat, it feels like the heavens themselves are watching. When the festival finally winds down, you are exhausted. Your feet ache, your back screams, and your hands are blistered from carrying baskets. But as you collapse onto your reed mat that night, you replay the image of the Pharaoh in your mind. The glitter of gold, the thunder of drums, the weight of divine presence. You will never be him. You will never even speak to him. But you were there. You walked in his shadow. And in Egypt, that alone is enough to make you part of something eternal.
Weeks turn into months. Months blur into years. And slowly, palace life becomes normal. Not easy, never easy, but familiar. You learn the rhythm of the place. Dawn begins with water and sweeping. Midday is hauling and serving. Evening is silence while the Pharaoh dines. Night is exhaustion, reed mats, and dreams of bread that isn't stale. You also learn the art of invisibility. In the palace, a servant is like furniture, useful when needed, invisible the rest of the time. Speak too much and you're scolded. Move too slowly and you're whipped. Look at someone too directly and you may be dismissed, or worse. But move with the flow, bow at the right times, and keep your mouth shut, and you might just survive long enough to see another sunrise. Gossip, however, is the lifeblood of the palace, and servants, though invisible, hear everything. You learn which noble secretly despises which priest. You learn that the Pharaoh's youngest son has a talent for sneaking honey cakes from the kitchens. You hear whispers that a scribe was caught altering grain tallies and now works in the quarries as punishment. You learn that one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting was sent away suddenly. No one says why, but everyone knows. Sometimes gossip keeps you alive. You learn which overseers are merciful and which strike at the smallest mistake. You know when to avoid the kitchens because the head cook is in one of his moods. You learn never to volunteer when the high priest asks for helpers. His helpers always come back looking like they've aged 10 years overnight. And then there are the punishments. The palace does not forgive mistakes. Drop a tray of figs and you're beaten. Spill wine on a noble's linen and you might lose more than your position. Once you see a servant dragged out into the courtyard and whipped for stealing bread. The sound of the lashes lingers in your mind long after the servant is gone. So you learn. You learn to move carefully, to speak softly, to never draw attention. You learn to make yourself useful but not memorable, reliable but forgettable, the perfect servant. Yet, even within the palace, there are moments of humanity. Fellow servants become friends. You whisper jokes while scrubbing floors, share stolen dates in the shadows, and laugh quietly at nobles who trip over their own sandals. You bond over calloused hands and aching backs, over the strange shared fate of being invisible together. And every so often, you climb a little higher. One day, instead of sweeping courtyards, you're asked to tend to sacred animals. Ibises, cats, even a bull said to be the living embodiment of a god. Another day, you're trusted to carry messages between priests and scribes, told to repeat them word for word, like a human scroll. The work is harder, but the rewards are better. Softer bread, the occasional fig, maybe even a scrap of roasted meat. The more you prove yourself, the more dangerous it becomes. Because proximity to power is like standing near a fire. It can warm you, or it can burn you alive. Once, while delivering a message, you overhear nobles arguing. Their voices are sharp, their words dangerous. Something about succession, about which son should inherit the throne. You don't understand all of it, but you understand enough. This is not something a servant should hear. You slip away quickly, praying the gods erase you from their memory. At night, lying on your reed mat, you think about how strange your life has become. You were born in a mud hut by the Nile, chasing chickens and annoying crocodiles. Now you walk marble halls, carry offerings to the gods, and serve a man worshipped as divine. You are still poor, still replaceable, still invisible, but you live in the very heart of Egypt's glory. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when the palace is asleep and the Nile hums softly in the distance, you allow yourself a dangerous thought. Perhaps history itself will remember you, not by name, not by deed, but simply because you were here, a servant in the palace of the Pharaoh. You drift to sleep with that thought, the stars bright overhead, the desert vast and eternal beyond the walls.
Time moves differently in the palace. Days are long, filled with chores and heat, but the years slip by quietly. One moment, you're the wide-eyed villager gawking at gold-covered statues. The next, you're the seasoned servant, showing new arrivals how to hold a broom properly, warning them not to step on the wrong shadow, reminding them to bow lower, speak softer, move faster. Your hair begins to grey earlier than you'd like. Your hands are permanently rough, your back stiff from years of hauling water and scrubbing floors. But your eyes, they've seen more than most Egyptians could dream of. You've witnessed coronations, royal births, and funerals that shook the palace like thunder. You've seen pharaohs come and go, their names carved in stone, while your own remains unspoken. You are not carved into temple walls, not painted in the tombs. But you were there. You lived history, even if you were only its shadow. As you grow older, your duties change. The younger servants take over the heavy lifting, while you're given lighter tasks, polishing shrines, carrying messages, keeping watch in storerooms. You've earned a reputation for reliability. Not remarkable, not brilliant, just steady. And in the palace, steady means survival. There are moments of quiet pride.
A priest nods at your work, saying nothing more, but you feel the weight of approval. A scribe asks for you by name to deliver a message, trusting your memory over others. These are small victories, invisible to the world, but they warm you like sunlight through cool stone. And still, the gossip never stops. You've learned to navigate it carefully, like a fisherman steering through crocodile-infested waters. You know which stories are harmless and which are dangerous enough to silence. You've seen servants rise high through luck and favor, only to fall faster than they climbed. You've also seen quiet, cautious ones like yourself grow old in the palace, largely ignored and still alive. When festivals come, you no longer run with baskets on your back. Instead, you guide the younger ones, watching them scurry like you once did, their eyes wide at the sight of the Pharaoh's procession. You smile faintly, remembering your own first glimpse of the God King. You tell them in whispers, "Don't look too long, bow deeper, keep your hands steady." They listen. Some don't. Those who don't learn quickly. And then one night, lying on your mat, you reflect. You were born poor. You were chosen not because of destiny, but because a man with a staff pointed at you in a dusty village. You spent your life in service to a god king who never knew your name. You scrubbed floors, carried jars, bowed until your spine bent. To history, you are no one. But to you, this was everything. You stood in temples where gods were said to walk. You watched rituals that bound heaven and earth. You saw pharaohs in their glory, their power so immense that entire nations trembled at their gaze. You lived inside the heart of a civilization that will one day fill history books, museums, and the imaginations of people far in the future. And you realize something. Greatness isn't just the pharaohs. It belongs, in some small way, to everyone who carried the weight of his world. To the builders who lifted stones, to the scribes who wrote his words, to the priests who sang his hymns, and yes, to the servants who swept his halls and brought him bread. Because even shadows are proof that light exists. And so, as you close your eyes in the palace of the Pharaoh, you let that thought comfort you, that while no one will remember your name, the gods saw you. The Nile carried your reflection. The palace walls heard your footsteps. You were here, and that was enough. Now let yourself drift. Imagine the hum of the Nile outside, steady and eternal. The faint glow of oil lamps flickering against painted walls. The distant murmur of priests chanting, fading into the night. Breathe slowly. You are no longer carrying jars, no longer sweeping endless courtyards, no longer bowing before kings. You are simply resting, as you deserve. Rest, servant of the Pharaoh. Your work is done. Sleep.